everyone. This is the Buttercup podcast where we talk about early childhood topics. My name is Marisa Macy, and I'm the host of the Buttercup podcast. Thank you for joining us today, and I'm super excited because my guest today is Alisha Rone. And Alisha Rone was born and raised in Wyoming and graduated from the University of Wyoming with a Bachelor of Arts in Psychology and Communications. Alisha then moved to Boise, Idaho, where she spent most of her career as Development and Marketing Director for Saint Alphonsus Hospital. After 10 years in Boise, she returned to Wyoming to be the Executive Director of the Wyoming Medical Center Foundation. Alisha focused on capital projects such as building a new tower for the hospital and wellness center, as well as specific programs such as providing support for cancer patients and a hospitality house for out-of-town patients. That's so cool. In 2017, Alisha became the executive director for the Child Development Center. The CDC serves over 700 children with early intervention therapies, preschool services, and free development screenings for the community. In 2024, Alisha received her master's in curriculum and instruction, as well as her early childhood special education endorsement from the University of Wyoming. Alisha has sat on Wyoming's Early Intervention Council, the Wyoming State Bar Board of Professional Responsibility, Wyoming's Charter for Plans of Safe Care, and Wyoming's Department of Family Services Steering Committee. She leads a staff of 120 people and through her leadership has a 90% staff satisfaction rating. That's so cool. The CDC has excelled under her leadership by opening an outpatient clinic for children birth to 21 years of age, a pediatric audiology clinic, and a quick care clinic. The CDC has received #1 preschool and development center ratings from Oil City News and the Casper Star Tribune, the State of Wyoming's Model Program for Inclusion, and won the Daniels Fund Salute to Excellence Award. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Awesome. In her spare time, Alisha enjoys spending time with her husband, Mike, and 2 boys, Max and Micky, in Wyoming's great outdoors.
Yes.
Thanks for joining us today, Alisha.
Thank you, Dr. Macy. I'm excited to be here.
Oh, I'm so excited you are here too. And I was wondering if you could share, I just read your bio and it's so impressive, but how did you get started in the early childhood field?
When I started with my bachelor's degree at the University of Wyoming, I placed focus on child psychology. And I think that is what somewhat directed me to the early childhood field. I didn't realize I would be in turn running the Child Development Center, starting about 10 years ago. But it really kicked off when I came on board with the Child Development Center here in Casper, Wyoming. And so I would say that kind of spearheaded my career in working in early childhood when I started here.
Yes, and I love talking to you and other guests on this podcast to show my students just how many different pathways there are to a career. So you've had background in business, in healthcare, in education, and it's not always what you think, that it's just a straight line. There's many different pathways, and it's so exciting to hear about your background.
Yes, and I think any pathway you take can lead you to be, the leader of an organization. And so even if you're getting your early childhood special ed endorsement or getting your bachelor's in early childhood, you just never know where that will take you. And one day you may be leading a child development center. So, yes.
Well, and you are the leader of an early childhood special education system and organization. What is early childhood special education and why is it important?
So early childhood special education really serves children birth to 5 and in 2 different sections. So Part C in Wyoming serves children birth to 2 years of age, and then Part B serves children 3 to 5 years of age. And we know that early intervention sets the child up for best success in the future. And so early intervention to us is determining the child's diagnosis or developmental delay, and then in turn providing them with what they need to be successful. So that's when we step in with our therapists in providing speech therapy, occupational therapy, physical therapy, along with our early childhood special educators providing cognitive skill development, preschool services, our early childhood interventionists going in the home and working with the parents and on potentially their child's developmental delay or diagnosis, and just again setting that child up for best success on providing these services and kind of going in and just really supporting their growth, because everything happens from birth to 5. We see that studies show that children go through so much growth and development during those age. And so if we can go in and support the family and the children with early childhood special education and early intervention services, it's key to how they're going to perform in the future.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much. Yes, it's so important. And you lead a team of 120 plus people, and you've been
Yes.
doing it for a long time. And a lot of my students will be going into leadership positions. Do you have any tips for people who uh, become leaders in early childhood special education,
Yes.
or
Yes.
lessons learned
Yeah.
advice?
Every day. I'm still learning. I think the biggest thing for me under my leadership is, especially with 120 employees and they're all going in 100 different directions, but just providing a culture of positivity. I think that's so important because, these kiddos go through so much. One could be blind, one could have a very rare diagnosis, one could be taken out of their home, or have had trauma of some form. And so I think having a culture of positivity, and that's why I do like to share, we have a 90% staff satisfaction rating. And it's simply because we put the staff, above us in leadership and really try and support them the best we can. And so if you get into a leadership role, above all else, make sure you create a positive culture, having an open door policy, letting staff come in and share their joys or when they're having a bad day. I think that's so important. And so we've tried to foster that here at the Child Development Center. And again, as you go into leadership, I think you have to keep that top of mind.
Yes, I love that. Thank you so much for that. A culture of positivity.
Yes.
I wrote it down because I think it's so important. I mean, I want it to be bumper stickers. I want it to be in all my mirrors and all my spaces where I occupy. I'll put on a little post-it note right by my desk because you're right. It is so important. And we're all leaders. If you work with
Mhm.
children and families and you're serving others, your leadership has uh, no limits. You
Right.
are leading with families, with children, with your community, with your team. And I love that idea that we can all contribute to a culture of positivity and being positive. Last month, I received an award from my faculty senate here at the University of Wyoming, and I was asked to talk about leadership. And I based my talk on our students. They had this table where they were giving out stickers of Mr. Rogers that people could put on their laptops or on their water bottles. And the sticker was real simple. It had Mr. Rogers, and he was holding Daniel Tiger, the puppet. And in the background were lyrics from one of his beautiful songs about being a neighbor in the neighborhood. And and then below it said WWMRD. And I never heard of what that was before. And I asked the students in the student union, I said, what does that mean? And they said, what would Mr. Rogers do? And I thought, oh my gosh, They are such amazing student leaders and sharing the radical kindness from Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood and the work of Fred Rogers. And your idea of a culture of positivity just goes right into that about creating a culture of kindness and being good to each other. And he had a wonderful
Yes.
quote about making goodness attractive. And just, when families are going through a tough time, they don't have time for a culture that's anything but positive. So we all
Yes.
have to contribute to that. Yeah.
Yeah,
So,
we actually had a new employee that just started here this week, and she came in and she said, Lish, I have never started in an organization where everyone is so positive and welcoming, and you have to have that in your organization, especially when you serve children and families. And so I'm so glad that when other people walk in to our center, they feel that. And you can see that in other organizations as well. If you notice, like when you walk into a school or a preschool or a daycare, how do they make you feel? And however you feel is how the children and families are also feeling. And so if you can spread that, I think it's key.
yes, it is contagious. And
Yes.
positivity can be contagious. And um, yes, those important cultural aspects of um, being positive, we want
Mhm.
to embrace. I was just thinking about my mom, and I grew up in Seattle, and the Costco was developed or pioneered in Kirkland, Washington, not far from where I grew up. And my mom went shopping one day, and she saw the one of the founders of Costco in the bakery, and he was talking to his employees. And she went to go see what was going on. And one of the things he asked them in the bakery was, "Do you like your job? Tell me about how you feel about your job." And my mom was so surprised that here was the CEO and this leader in this really big organization, and he wanted to know how did they like their job. And I think what you were doing, asking them while they're there, about their levels of satisfaction and taking that feedback and using it, I think is so smart because we don't want to wait until the exit survey after people
Yes.
leave or they've become so unhappy that, just retaining them is a challenge. But, what are things we can learn along the way that would help shape our culture, shape the way that we work together? And I love that idea. Well,
Yes.
you're up in Casper and Wyoming. We have a lot of rural and remote areas that we serve children and families. What are some things you've learned about delivering services in remote settings and rural, maybe sometimes hard to reach settings?
Yeah, so we're fortunate that, our center covers Natrona County, which is um, not so remote. We do have to travel to Midwest and things, but in Wyoming, there's 14 regions of child development centers that serve, a whole section of the state. And some of those, especially Part C, service providers that have to go into the home and teach families how to work with their infant and whatnot, they travel all over. But you're right, with Wyoming roads and everything else that can be handed to that provider, at times we have to do um, our appointments over Zoom with families. And it's not ideal, but I think having that touch point with families is so important. If you can't get out to the house on bad roads or get to a preschool on bad roads, it's so important to have that touch point in Zoom with those providers and those families. And so that's oftentimes what our staff do. They also have a toolkit of home routines or ideas that they're showing the family this technique of infant massage, and then they leave a flyer at the house exactly showing them the skills that they taught them. And I just think that's so important as early childhood educators or early childhood special educators is to always have a leave behind. If you're working on potty training, here's this out of my toolbox. And so I can't say it enough. Our providers just have, one of those folders of different leave behind or take home information that they can provide families. And because you may teach a skill and then you leave and you don't see them again for a few days or a week. But if you leave that skill with them to continue to practice at home and work on at home, it's just so important. And families are sponges. They need that information. And so I would recommend to start building a toolkit that you can provide to families of information.
Yes, I love that. That is such a great strategy. Creating a toolkit and having a leave behind. The
Mhm.
parents and the family are there all the time.
Yes.
We're there just for a short little snapshot of time, and having that leave behind is so important. I
Yes.
had um, an example of a leave behind that I didn't create, but someone else did. And they were working with a child that had speech language development that they were working on. And the child had just gotten their tongue clipped because the child was tongue tied and they were working on articulation. And so the early interventionist would leave behind every time they went, like what you were saying, something that the parent could put up on the refrigerator and just remember, like during meal times or other routines of the day, they could practice that oral motor skill and things like using a straw or blowing bubbles, but just getting stronger those muscles around the lips and the mouth so that the child could be able to benefit from the interventions that the family was implementing after the interventionist had left. So that's
Yeah,
great.
and it's not, yeah, and the interventions are great, like, exactly what you were saying, Dr. Macy. I think also down to the basics. Like, my child's not sleeping. My child's having tantrums. My child is potty training, teething, all the things. And so even a form or something that encourages them on all of those daily tasks is wonderful to give to parents. And so I think while having a toolkit of the actual early intervention services and what you're doing as an interventionist is great, but then also just down to the basics that families need support with.
Yes, yes, that's great. And the touch points that you talked about, that could
Mhm.
be virtual and video conferencing remotely can really help bridge the miles and the gap when we can't be in person. And I think that almost was a silver lining of the pandemic that
Mhm.
we started to pivot and find other ways when we can't be there in person. And when remote and distance is how we're delivering or able to deliver services. Well, my next question was about family-centered practices, and you kind of already answered it about your outlook on ways to support families. Was there anything else you wanted to say about families? And
Yeah, actually, there is. With I always have something to say, Dr. Macy, but I I think no matter what, the family has the largest voice at the table. And sometimes we see that when we get into IEP meetings or IFSP meetings, etc., and we're trying to determine the best thing to do for the child, or we're going through it somewhat right now with transitioning children to kindergarten. And I really like to encourage families to find their voice and have the largest voice at the table. And so at times that means pushing up against the rules and regulations that are placed upon us. But you can never go wrong if you really listen to the family and what their needs are and wants are, and then you just figure out a way to best support that in the system that we're in. And so I just really want to encourage, your students as they get into the field and whatnot, just to make sure that that family, parent, provider, adoptive parent, etc., has a huge voice at the table. Sometimes I sit in meetings and with other, agencies, etc., and they don't empower parents to have that, and I just feel it's so important.
yes, empowering. others and especially parents. Um, the Division for Early Childhood conference was last fall, and I went to a session by Dr. Robin McWilliam, who is known for routines-based interviews. And he had a book that just came out in 2025, and it was all about aphorisms that we use in early intervention or little sayings or mottos. And one of them was what he calls the Hoosiers rule. People from Indiana are called Hoosiers, and he talked a little bit about the origin of the word Hoosiers, which I didn't know anything about. But he said, if you've ever seen the basketball movie with Gene Hackman, which I had seen it a long time ago in the late 80s, but I went home and watched it again. And he said this idea of the Hoosiers rule is something he always shares with professionals because in the movie, Gene Hackman is the coach, and he's got a team that he takes over, and the team is having all kinds of problems. But one of the things that they do is they have this superstar player who always hogs the ball and always takes all the shots and never passes it to the others. Well, you can't have an effective team if there's just one superstar. So he said, don't take any shots until you've passed the ball 4 times. And so he brings it back to RBI and the work that we do in early childhood special education about how important it is to pass the ball to families at least 4 times before we offer ideas, before we offer interventions, before, we jump in. We have a sample size of lots and lots of kids and families that we've worked with, and the family may just have a sample size of one, but that is the most important for them. And if we jump in and are the experts and want to solve everything right off the bat, it's going to be really hard to establish that rapport and that team and amplify the family voice if that's the beginning of the relationship. And so this idea of the
Yes.
Hoosiers rule is pass the ball, empower others, share, don't hog the ball. And what you were saying about amplifying family voices when we deliver family-centered practices is, I think, such a good practice that we have in early childhood special education.
Yes, and just taking time to listen. You know, I don't think you can go wrong if you just take the time to sit back and listen before we respond and take in everything that the parent is saying. That's one thing I've learned in my leadership is don't right away respond. Don't right away come out with something. Like really take in what they're saying, mull it over, then respond. And that's the same with my staff too. I'll always say, let me sleep on it. And so I'm not rushing to a decision, but and they know I'm actually taking the time to really, think and place focus on what they're wanting to do or an idea they have or something going on. And so I'm not just rushing, to say something or to respond. And so I think that's my other thing is just take the time to listen to everyone around you.
Yes, the importance and value of listening. And Alicia, who is someone who inspires you or something that inspires you?
I was thinking about that question, Dr. Macy, because there's just moments every day. But honestly, since I've been in this position, the children are what drive me and inspire me in the role that I'm in. And, I could be having a bad day or something goes on, but if I just take the time and walk down and spend time in a classroom or with a kiddo getting therapies, right away, my day changes. And here I always say at our Child Development Center, the children drive what we do. And so, like when we started the outpatient therapy clinic, we were just in early intervention services. We were just a developmental preschool when I started. And what happened was the kids would go to kindergarten, the parents would cry because they left the CDC, the provider would be crying because they're leaving the CDC. And I thought, well, why does this have to be? Why don't we start an after-school program where the children can still come and get speech, OT, PT, reading, coaching, feeding therapy, etc., and they'll have the same provider. We don't have to cry that they're leaving. And so that's what drove our outpatient therapy. Then we had a cohort of 16 children who were deaf or hard of hearing. And we decided man, we should have a pediatric audiologist right here on site to support kids from all over Wyoming who fail their initial hearing testing, need hearing aids, etc. So that's what drove us to open an audiology clinic with the Wyoming EDI program and have a pediatric audiologist on site. And then last year, or a couple of years ago, actually, now, we had this little one who got bit in the face by the family's pit bull and bit her eye. It was bleeding, infected. They came to school. They hadn't gone to a clinic or an urgent care or anything. And I thought, why don't we have a nurse practitioner on site and a quick care that families can access? And so everything I've done, the children have inspired me to do it, the reasoning behind it. And I think you can't go wrong when children direct you to do something. And thankfully, my board and staff have been on board with me with all the programs that we've started, but they're truly my inspiration. I mean, they are resilient, right? I mean, you see kiddos handed the worst situation and they bounce back from it, or they know no different, and that it doesn't affect their day. And so if we can have that same frame of mind as we work, in with children, and just seeing everything that they do in their day and letting them inspire us, I think we'll go so much further with our programs and in life in general, because honestly, they truly are an inspiration in their everyday, especially with early intervention.
Yes. Oh, that's beautiful. Yes, the children are so inspirational and they inspire us with their resiliency, their capacity to look at the world in their unique lens. And yes, gaining inspiration from children is such a
Yes.
great way to, especially in a leadership position. I mean, you probably have a lot of paperwork and a lot of things in the office, but just getting around children again or walking into a classroom and just hanging out with the children, I think is such a great way to remember why we do what we do. They inspire.
Right. And I have to actually schedule it in my calendar so nobody puts me in a meeting to actually go down and see, an audiology appointment or an infant getting therapy, or go visit a classroom and do Play-Doh with them. And it's so important, if you get into a leadership role, to take that time, mark it out in your schedule to actually go and be present in what's happening in the classrooms, etc. And so I do that on my calendar, and it makes my day. It honestly does, because it just changes your frame of mind, or whatever else stressors you're dealing with on the side. So it's so important.
Yes. And I'm just thinking about the ways that you have had a growth mindset and when you've noticed opportunities for things, you've created ways to make it happen in your system and in your organization. Do you have any tips for how you do that? I mean, it sounds to me like you have, Alicia, an entrepreneurial mindset where, okay, well, right now we don't have an after school care or we don't have this right now, but let's figure out how to do it. What is your process like? I mean, how did you do that? I mean, I know
Yeah.
you talked about the Eddie grant. I mean, you must be writing lots of grants, working and collaborating with others. Do you have any tips for leading in that sort of way where you're creating things that aren't there and making the organization stronger by uh, uh, finding opportunities and then going after those?
Yeah, I think, as programs, if we are just remaining stagnant and doing things that we've always done and not looking for ways to grow, you know what they say, you're just going to have what you already have. And so for me, with these children and growing our program to what it is today, I think when I came on board, we had about 70 employees and serving about 300 to 400 children. And now we're at 700 in just that amount of time. And Again, it takes a lot of buy-in. While I've had these great ideas, every time I went to my leadership team, they were like, here she goes again with one of her wild ideas. What's going to happen? And I think that's kind of the most important thing is having that buy-in from those that you work with and the understanding of the why. And then bringing the staff along with you in the journey that you're on and in your board. That is so important. And then figuring out, okay, how am I going to do it? So here's an example. We have grown so much, in the past 8 years that we are at capacity. And I knew I needed to expand our building. And so we're groundbreaking in February, but I had to figure out how to raise $3 million to be able to do this. And so it's just, putting your idea on paper and then figuring out how you're going to get there. Are you going to fundraise? Are you going to raise grants? Are you going to change your operational budget to do what you need to do? And then getting the buy-in, from your staff, board, leadership team, teachers, therapists, etc., and then communicating on that. Communication is key. And in fact, on our staff satisfaction survey, the one thing that our staff want from us and families is communication. I feel like if I walk them from their car into the building, that's still not enough communication. And so that's a huge piece of it as well. Communicating with families, staff, and those around you on everything you're doing and being transparent is key to taking on any of these services or new ideas, etc.
That is great. Yes, the communication and the relationships. And I liked how you said that about walking in together from the parking lot, because
Yeah.
every interaction is an opportunity to connect and communicate and show how much we care about each other and about our families and children. Well, Alicia, do you have a highlight of your career so far?
I think one of the biggest highlights is starting all these programs and they're successful because that's the other thing. You may have an idea and you're going to do it and then it bombs, right? Luckily, that hasn't happened to me yet, but I put a lot of myself into these programs to ensuring they're a success. But I think starting, a pediatric audiology clinic, an outpatient therapy, now a quick care clinic, those have definitely been the highlights of my career. And then, like you said in my bio, last year we got the Daniels Fund Award, Salute to Excellence. And that was an award that the Daniels Fund serves New Mexico, Wyoming, Utah, and Colorado. And they serve about 500 nonprofits. And out of those 500, we were chosen as their top nonprofit and we were given $250,000. And so that definitely was a highlight in my career. And it was just from starting these programs and our center being as successful as it is. And I truly attribute that to my staff. They're the ones that are teaching, providing therapies, etc. And they're the ones that got us that award. And so that has also been a great highlight to my career.
Yes. Oh my gosh. Congratulations. That is
Thank
so
you.
cool. Very cool. And the pediatric audiology, I think you guys are the only one in the state, right?
We
Everyone
are.
in Wyoming comes to Casper for pediatric audiology and what you're doing there.
Yes. And so when a kiddo fails their newborn hearing screening in a hospital in Wyoming, they are referred to our pediatric audiologist who then does the follow-up evaluation to see, if they have a hearing loss in one ear or both ears, etc. And so we're very fortunate to have that partnership with the EDI program in Wyoming, the Early Hearing Detection and Intervention Program, and to host the pediatric audiologist here. Yeah, it's pretty awesome.
Congratulations.
Thanks.
So cool. Well, how can podcast listeners follow you, Alicia?
So I think the best thing to do is to follow us on our Facebook page, which is the Child Development Center of Natrona County, because you'll find so many ideas that we do in our center or with kiddos, or you see us hosting family to family days, etc. So I would definitely recommend that. And then our website, you could follow us as well at cdccasper.org and just see the number of things that we do on that as well. So that would be wonderful.
Very cool. And the website has job opportunities because some of my students might want to apply.
Yes, yes, we are always hiring, no matter what. It just is what we do. So, yes, job opportunities. I have a blog on there. So, all the things we post on there. So, that would be great.
Well, thank you so much, Alicia Rone, for everything you do for children, families, and our workforce. It is
Yeah.
such a delight to talk to you and learn more about what you are doing. And thank you, thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Macy. I wish your students well, that's for sure.